Lincoln Adjacent is a collection of 3 plays by 2 playwrights, Stephen Blackburn and me, about characters that are not always talked about favorably in the Lincoln myth. My 2 plays are a piece about Elizabeth Keckley, who was Mary Todd Lincoln's seamstress and confidant during her years in the White House. My other play is about John Wilkes Booth, who goes without introduction. And the 3rd play is a piece about Frederick Douglass and his association with Elizabeth Stanton, written by Stephen Blackburn.
One of the reasons I'm excited about working with Roger Mason is that before he and I even met, we were writing with parallel interests. Both of us know that history is not a dry subject.
One of the things I think is really exciting about Lincoln Adjacent is we have 2 people approaching history from somewhat different perspective. They're not focusing necessarily on the main players or the main moments in those players' lives. They're looking at the lesser told moments, the moments that history books often leave out or stop before. These moments are oftentimes what show the humanity of these people, the kind of greater depth of who they are, the struggles they faced.
I think there's something important about reevaluating and reassessing the myths that we tell ourselves about our history.
One of the problems with the great man theory of history is that it ignores or discounts the agency of the people that surround the so-called great man. Women and people of color generally remain in the shadows of traditional American histories.
I want people to question why they believe the history they do. I want them to question the very fabric of the mythologies that they have grown to accept and promote about who they are. I want them to think a little bit differently about these characters. I want them to think of John Wilkes Booth not just as the villain who killed the great emancipator of the slaves. I want them to think of him as a Southern gentleman. I want them to think of him as Junius Booth's son. I want them to think of him as an actor who was misunderstood and misconstrued in his moment. I want people to know who Elizabeth Keckley was and finally not have her life disputed. This is a woman who spent maybe the 50 years of her life enslaved and spent some part of her life defending the fact that she actually existed. There was an effort after Keckley wrote her tell-all book, Behind the Scenes, where her authorship was contested, but also her very existence. How could a woman, let alone a black woman, let alone a black woman fashionista, write such an eloquent and brilliant and stirring portrait of what it means to be a cultural worker within the context of the White House?
Douglass became an internationally renowned activist and public speaker. His manners and eruditeness impressed Lincoln and basically convinced Lincoln of the humanity of African Americans. Douglass became an advisor to Lincoln and was one of the key people that convinced Lincoln to let African Americans fight for the Union Army. Without those soldiers, the Union may very well have lost the Civil War.
We are looking to kind of break from tradition. This isn't going to be a sort of a historical reenactment. We really want to create a space that is somewhat psychological, where we feel like we're actually looking at the deeper motivations behind these people. It's not about the teacups and the lace. It's about actually the larger kind of emotional movements in the piece.
And that is what Lincoln Adjacent is bringing to Hollywood Fringe Festival 2014. History, the real history.